Welcome to the most detailed camera comparison between the iPhone XS Max and the Samsung Galaxy Note 9, Apple's and Samsung's flagship smartphones for 2018. So in this video, I'll be testing pretty much everything you can think of when it comes to the camera of these two phones, from general photography to smart HDR comparison, macro shots, zoom shots, microphone tests, front HDR, portrait mode, bitrate comparison, slow motion shots, time-lapse, panorama, autofocusing speed. Yeah, this is gonna be one crazy video, so get a popcorn ready because you'll definitely need it for this one. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the HDR photos with a back-facing camera. So in this one, we have some buildings, we have a river, so we have a lot of dark areas and bright areas. And in this one, they both look actually really good. The Note 9 is a bit more saturated, while the iPhone XS looks a bit more natural. There's more over-sharpening happening on the Note 9. If you take a look at the water is also more bluish on the Note 9 and darker, so there is more contrast on the Note 9. Personally, in this case, I do prefer the Note 9, but let me know in the comments which one would you guys pick. Next up, we have a proper HDR image. So we have this building, lots of reflection, lots of light, lots of dark areas, and here the iPhone XS Max, I don't know, the image is much more uniformly lit than the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. The Note 9 is brighter, but the XS Max looks more realistic. If you take a look at the bottom section, the image is also sharper on the iPhone XS Max, and then if you take a look at the tone, the color temperature, the Note 9 is much warmer than the iPhone XS Max. Moving on to the famous gazebo shot that I keep using in my previous videos. So this one is actually a really difficult shot to get because you get a lot of bright areas, dark areas, and then you also have those bright buildings in the background. Now, everything is actually perfectly exposed on the iPhone XS. The stone wall, for example, the house in the background, these are perfectly visible, and even the roof looks natural and doesn't have those blown out whites that the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 does. However, the Note 9 does have more detail, slightly more detail when it comes to the darker areas like the shadow in the image. Next up, we have a close-up HDR shot. So this is also a pretty difficult one to take. It was really sunny, and the iPhone XS Max is actually sharper in a lot of areas of the image where the Note 9 is actually blurry. So for example, take a look at the building on the far left. But then I do actually prefer the way the concrete wall looks on the Note 9. I think it looks sharper, whereas the brick texture actually looks better on the iPhone XS Max. But yeah, overall, the iPhone XS Max actually takes the HDR section of this video. Definitely subscribe and enable notifications if you're new to the channel and you want to see more in-depth comparisons like this one. But yeah, this is just the beginning of this video. Next up, we have the macro section. So here we have an image taken with not the zoom module, but a regular module, but really close to the subject, in this case, a bolt. And on the iPhone XS Max, everything is much sharper. Again, everything seems to be in focus, also exposed correctly. Take a look at the shine on the left on the iPhone XS Max versus the Note 9. And by the way, fun fact is that the Note 9 actually was using the f2.4 aperture, and the iPhone XS Max was using obviously the f1.8 because that's the only one it has. But it's still sharper on the iPhone XS Max. That's a bit strange. And oh boy, take a look at this boy. So this is the zoom shot. So the iPhone XS Max, again, a much more natural look compared to the Note 9. The Note 9 has a more warmer tint, but the biggest difference is when it comes to the exposure. So yeah, the iPhone XS Max nails the exposure perfectly, and even when it comes to the sharpness, the iPhone XS Max is again much better. And then in this one, also taken with the zoom module, take a look at these buildings. The image is actually really similar on both, but pay attention to the top of the building, how the lines are completely invisible on the Note 9, whereas the iPhone XS Max actually exposed those correctly. Now, moving on to some video. So this was taken in 4K 60, obviously with a back-facing camera on both. And immediately the iPhone XS Max has much more detail. It is brighter, and then the Note 9 is actually over sharpened in a lot of areas, and I don't know, the Note 9 looks a bit lower res than the iPhone XS Max. Now, the reason for this might actually be the bitrate. So on the iPhone XS Max, the bitrate was 100 megabits per second, whereas on the Note 9, it was 72 megabits per second. But both have really good color and exposure. The XS Max has a bit of a better exposure than the Note 9. It gets more data in the shot. And then towards the end, especially if you take a look at the trees, they're much brighter. They're brighter green and perfectly visible on the XS Max, and not so much on the Note 9. I feel like the Note 9 crushes the blacks a bit too much, so the contrast is a bit too high on the Note 9. But yeah, both did a really good job in terms of fluidity, both at 4K 60 frames per second. Next up, we're also doing another video test with a back-facing camera, but in this one, I want to test out the HDR. So Apple says that with the iPhone XS and also the XS Max, if you shoot in 30 frames per second, you actually get a better dynamic range. So let's see if that's actually the case. Okay, so this one is actually much more similar. The shots are more similar than in the previous test. On the iPhone XS Max, we have a bluer sky, but then if you take a look at the reflections at the end, they were actually incredibly strong in real life, and the Note 9 managed to keep those authentic to real life, so to say, whereas the iPhone XS Max actually tried fixing those blown out areas. But yeah, both are really good in this one. So what about the stabilization? Which one is more stable when it comes to recording 4K 60 video? Well, in terms of exposure, by the way, this is something that I have to mention. So the iPhone XS Max has better exposure, especially if you take a look at the clouds. But honestly, both are quite bad at stabilizing, both when I'm walking and when I'm running. So the Note 9 does have a bit more warp stabilization if you take a look at the edges, especially, which is essentially visible more towards the end when I'm actually running. Now, in the end, you either get more warping and more stabilization, or less warping and also less stabilization, which is pretty much what the iPhone XS Max does. Moving on to the autofocusing speed test. Both are pretty good in this one. So the iPhone XS Max does have a much better exposure, much quicker than what the iPhone X had last year, but it is slower and smoother than the Note 9. The Note 9 is quicker overall, but it has a more abrupt focus. So yeah, in the end, both are really good at autofocusing. But yeah, again, the iPhone XS Max is slower but smoother, while the Note 9 is quicker but more abrupt. So let's move on to some actual low light shots, and let's see which one is better at nighttime. So in this first image, the Note 9 is actually a bit brighter. The iPhone XS Max is sharper, especially if you take a look at the left-hand side of the image, and also a more uniform exposure if you look at the blue lamppost, for example, how the XS Max managed to keep those perfectly exposed. The XS is also sharper when it comes to the middle river building, that's sharper, and pretty much the entire image, if you zoom in, is sharper, but the water looks brighter and the whole image looks brighter on the Note. Now, this is a pretty interesting one. So here we have an actual nuke, guys. By the way, fun fact, and this one is actually better on the Note 9. So take a look at the text on the right-hand side of the image. Interesting enough, it's perfectly visible on the Note 9, whereas on the iPhone XS Max, it's actually blown out, which is the first time the iPhone XS Max actually blew out something interesting. But the Note 9 is greener and more saturated. Also, fun fact, the iPhone XS Max is much noisier than the Note 9. The Note 9 is cleaner because of that f1.5 aperture, which helps a ton in low light. Next up, we have this image of this building. Now, in this one, you can probably tell that the Note 9 looks so much better, but actually in real life, the colors were more similar to the iPhone XS Max's colors. So XS Max got more natural colors, but the Note 9, in my opinion, looks better. I do prefer that shot. The Note 9 is also sharper than the XS Max, so again, the Note 9 nails this low light shot as well. And here we have a bit of a different one. So we have this light post which emits a lot of strong light. Now, surprisingly, the iPhone XS Max managed to actually keep the light bulb properly exposed. Interesting. But the Note 9 is actually sharper, and again, it has more vibrant colors. So when it comes to the low light photography, so far, the iPhone XS Max won in terms of HDR, but in terms of low light photography, the Note 9 actually won this round. Next up, we have low light with flash. So here I wanted to take a shot of something that had a bit of light in as well, not just something that was completely dark. And in this one, honestly, I do prefer the Note 9. The flash seems to be stronger, so it lights up the entire area, while also keeping the lamppost from being overexposed. The XS Max tried to hide the use of flash. This is pretty much what iPhones have been doing since the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X. So they tried to mimic the idea of not using a flash with a flash. So a more subtle flash versus a more obvious one on the Note 9. So now let's see which one has a better zoom module in low light. Well, in this case, the Note 9 is again better, so there's less noise when compared to the XS Max. It's a bit too warm when it comes to the color temperature. The Note 9 is quite a bit sharper, again, because of less noise versus the iPhone XS Max. So yeah, again, the Note 9 takes this one as well. So what about video in low light? Well, the iPhone XS Max seems to perfectly expose those bright lights, which is quite surprising considering that this is not a photo, it's actually a video, and it has to process everything in real time for every single frame. This was taken, by the way, in 4K 30 on both of these phones. So yeah, nothing gets blown out on the XS Max, whereas on the Note 9, especially towards the end, there's a massive difference when it comes to exposure. If you take a look at this wall here, and then if you take a look at this bush here, again, very good exposure from the iPhone XS Max. It's a bit too warm and a bit blown out, quite a bit blown out on the Note 9. So what about the front-facing camera? Well, interesting enough, the XS Max is now way too saturated, so I look like a sunburnt orange or something. I don't know. The Note 9 made me look like Snow White, so I don't know. I would say they're both bad in terms of my skin tone. Let me know in the comments which one do you guys prefer. Next up, we have front-facing HDR. So do we even need to compare? Look at the sky, look at the skin tone. Yeah, the Note 9 does have a bit of a wider angle, so that's good. However, my shirt, by the way, fun fact, it was completely black. So my shirt was black, it wasn't blue. So the iPhone XS Max actually messed up the colors quite a bit. But it did manage to take a proper HDR shot by perfectly exposing the sky. Okay, so this is a front-facing camera test between the iPhone XS Max and the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. So first of all, let me know which one do you think sounds better. So this is the iPhone XS Max audio. And now this is the audio coming from the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. terms of the HDR processing, take a look at the background. Which one processes the sky better? Which one do you think shows my shirt better? Yeah, in terms of the viewing angle, I think the Note 9 has quite a bit of a wider angle. But yeah, let me know in the comments which one do you think looks better, iPhone XS Max or Samsung Galaxy Note 9. Next up, we have front-facing camera in low light. Jesus, awful on both. But yeah, the Note 9 is brighter, so I would use the Note 9 over the XS Max, but they're both on the edge of even being usable in the first place. So yeah, both bad. The Note 9, not as bad. Now, in terms of front-facing low light with flash, the Note 9 is actually overexposed. It's way too bright, but the XS Max is too dim. Also, the XS Max is sharper. Let me know in the comments which one would you guys actually post on, Instagram or something. Okay, so this is the front-facing camera test video in low light with the iPhone XS Max and the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. It's crazy windy out here. But yeah, let me know in the comments which one do you guys think looks better. Take a look at the white balance, the noise, obviously the audio again. Also, keep in mind that the iPhone XS Max does 1080p 60 with a front-facing camera, and there's no option to do 1080p 30, which means that a Note 9 should actually look better, should actually be better in low light, because it does Quad HD 30. But yeah, let me know in the comments. Also, take a look at the viewing angle, how much more the Note 9 can actually get into the actual shot. Now, let's move on to a few special tests, starting off with portrait mode with a front-facing camera. Okay, so the first thing that I should probably mention is that you can actually adjust the blur in post on both of these phones, on both the front and the back-facing camera. And in this case, try and focus on the bokeh and not the image itself, not the colors, just the background selection. Now, the Note 9 is using software, the iPhone XS Max is using both hardware and software, and the iPhone XS Max basically creates a depth map. Now, in this case, I do prefer the Note 9. The Note 9 handles this one much better overall, I would say. The iPhone XS Max blurred my shirt where, it shouldn't have, whereas the Note 9 only messed up on my right hand. So what about the back-facing camera? Because in this case, they're both using both software and hardware as well with those two camera modules. Now, interesting enough, the photo is actually very similar on both. Both of them messed up on my left shoulder, and the iPhone XS Max messed up with the water a bit on the left. The XS, however, got my hair quite nicely in focus, whereas the Note 9 blurred my hair a bit too much. So yeah, let me know in the comments which one would you guys pick from these two. Now let's move on to some panorama shots. So first things first, I want to mention the numbers. So the iPhone XS Max has a 15.6 megabytes image, which is actually 61 megapixels in size. That's crazy, but the Note 9 is actually better. So 20.5 megabytes in size for that single image, which is actually 64 megapixels in size. Okay, so in terms of the colors, the Note 9 actually looks better. I do prefer the Note 9. It's more vibrant, but it's not too vibrant. The XS Max looks a bit too washed out. Now, when it comes to the actual exposure, take a look at the 11 building. Yeah, that one is actually overexposed on the Note 9. Again, the XS Max perfectly nails the exposure. And now when it comes to the actual stitching, both did a really, really good job. So the Note 9 messed up when it comes to the fence, for example. That was actually a tricky one to get right. The car also looks distorted on the right-hand side of the image. And then the yellow lines on the bottom look distorted on the Note 9. But yeah, the iPhone XS Max has better stitching overall. The Note 9 has better color overall in terms of panoramas. Overall, both are really good in this test. Moving on to some slow motion shots. This was a really fun test to do because we played around with some balloons and water. This was really cool. But yeah, in this one, the Note 9 actually takes a 720p footage, 720p video, and up to 960 frames per second versus 1080p at 240 on the iPhone XS Max. But let's be honest, they both look really, really bad. The iPhone XS Max looks like 480p, and the Note 9 looks like 1p. Also, the Note 9 had some random funny music for some reason. But the iPhone does capture the sound, which in some cases could be, well, pretty much every case more useful than, adding some random music. The Note 9 is 4 times slower, but also looks worse, so let me know in the comments which one would you choose, resolution or slow-mo. I would actually go for the Note 9 in this one, to be honest. And now we have the time-lapse shot. So I like time-lapses, but Apple and Samsung, they apparently don't. So the quality is actually 1080p on both. 1080p 30, not even 1080p 60, 1080p 30. Why Apple? Why Samsung? Time lapses are, fun fact, easier on the processor than even 4K 60 videos are. Why? Well, because you can process the images afterwards. The XS Max, in terms of this time-lapse, for example, it looks overly sharpened. I don't know. It looks like a Samsung, and then the Note looks like an iPhone. I know I haven't messed up the images. That's how they actually look. The colors, they look a bit more vibrant, quite a bit more vibrant on the Note 9. So honestly, I do like the Note 9 more than the iPhone XS Max in this case. However, the Note 9 sped up 5 minutes of footage into just 5 seconds of recording, while the iPhone turned 5 minutes into 20 seconds of recording, which, keep in mind, you can actually slow down even more in post if you need to do that. In terms of the actual bit rates for the time lapses, the iPhone XS Max had 19 megabits per second, while the Note 9 had 14 megabits per second. Again, Apple and Samsung, what's with those bit rates? Come on. Okay, so in the end, as a conclusion to the ultimate zone of the camera comparison, which phone has better overall camera, the Note 9 or the iPhone XS Max? Well, honestly, it's a bit hard to say because they both had their ups and their downs. So, for example, the XS Max actually won in terms of HDR processing and exposing everything in the shot correctly, even in the videos, interesting enough. The post-processing on the iPhone XS Max is just incredible, but then the Note 9 won in terms of low light. Low light video was pretty much a draw. Maybe the XS Max was a bit better, but in terms of general low light photography and front-facing camera shots in low light, the Note 9 was the clear winner here. But then the XS Max was the clear winner when it came to the video. Also, fun fact, the Note 9 can only do 10 minutes of 4K 30 video and only 5 minutes of 4K 60 video, which is basically a joke, considering that Samsung promotes 1 terabyte, the 1 terabyte Note 9 with 512 gigabytes of micro SD card storage, being able to record just 5 minutes, whereas on the iPhones you can do unlimited. That's why Samsung. And then the same applies to slow motion. The resolution on the Note 9 was just horrible. It's really bad on the iPhone XS Max as well, not as bad as the Note 9, but then the Note 9 also automatically starts the slow motion, fun fact, when it detects the movement, which in my case ended up me losing some footage because my hand was a bit too shaky. So, the phone actually started and stopped the recording before the main subject came into the scene. I mean, overall, like I said, they both have their ups and their downs. One of the biggest upsides actually for the Note 9 is the ability to put a 512 gigabyte micro SD card in this thing. Obviously for just for taking photos, because 4K videos are still limited to 5 minutes of recording, which is a pain. But then you can also use Google Photos on both of these and store unlimited photos up to 12 megapixels and unlimited videos up to 1080p in the cloud forever. So do use Google Photos on iOS as well, please. It's so much better than Apple Photos. But yeah, do let me know in the comments which camera did you prefer, Note 9 or the iPhone XS Max, and definitely subscribe and on notifications if you're new to the channel and you want to see more insanely detailed videos like this one. This one took quite a few days to make, so all of your feedback is really appreciated. Speaking of feedback, definitely give this video a like if you enjoyed it, let me know. And also join the zone if you want to support the channel, and you also get some pretty cool exclusive perks as well. I do want to be changing the live stream and possibly make that available to everyone, so let me know in the comments if you want to see that. So monthly public live stream, if you think that would be cool or not. And then the members would also get access to basically prioritized questions. So I would be able to see your questions first compared to non-members. But yeah, this was pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more camera comparisons and more speed comparisons like this one in the next few days. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.